begin with my greeting. Good early morning to our friends in North and South America. Good afternoon to our friends in the UK, Dubai. Good evening to our friends in Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Japan, and a good late evening to our friends in Australia. Hope you're all well. Nice to see your faces. JC, did you get a chance to download the most recent pictures of the statue?
I think I do have it. Just give me a second.
I'd like to show people, first of all. These pictures were taken 1 hour ago. Our team of sculptors are working. Tomorrow is their last full day of sculpting, so they're doing all the finishing touches of the Anandagiri Dana Hall sandstone Buddha statue, and I'd like to share with you progress. The Buddha first, JC, no?
Okay. Let me share my screen.
So now his face features have been sharpened, clarified, and the Buddha's hair swirls. You can also see the ornate floral aura has been completed now. And you have another one, JC, with a bigger picture. Yeah. Bodhi tree with leaves above, offering some shade. All of it looking very beautiful. I'm very pleased. 2 years of work. We'll be very lucky to have this image to bow to recollect the qualities of Lord Buddha. Peaceful, aloof, wise, yet kind. And we have another image. The sculptor decided to offer me a Nepali style Indra. Indra in the Pali Sutta is Saka, king of the gods, in Dawatimsa heaven. So the sculptor who I work with saw one of my small images in brass. He did a laser scan, and then he had his robot make an image in foam to the scale that he wanted to do it, and then he made it in sandstone. And there's another image. You see the whole. So Indra is a very interesting being because apparently, according to our Theravada Sutta, he asked Dhamma questions of Lord Buddha in Rajgir. And while listening to Lord Buddha's answers, he did attain to the first stage of enlightenment. So Indra actually is part of what we would call the Arya Sangha. Although he has a beautiful Deva body, his mind is established in enlightenment. So that it never occurred to me that I would need or want a beautiful statue of Indra in this size, but it looks like I'm going to have one. And so I did find a nice place to put it at the end of my walking meditation path. So very beautiful. You can see certain qualities in traditional sculpture, a sense of, you might notice after you've had a nice meditation session that the mind feels upright, but also relaxed and composed, but also friendly. You can see these lovely qualities in good sculpture. So just thought I'd like to share that with you. And so at the end of tomorrow, where they're going to be wrapped in plastic and they're going to be put on a truck, the day after that, traveling the 600 kilometers to Phetchabun on the border of Burma. So what do you reckon? Suai mai? Beautiful mai?
Swai Mark.
Suai mak mak.
Try.
Ajahn, is all the Indra has the third eye here? Because I think in Chinese there are some of the, not mistaken, one of the god also has the
Right.
third eye at the center.
Actually, yes, it's quite common. Because Shiva has an eye, a horizontal third eye like that in India. And White Tara obviously has the vertical third eye. And yes, I guess it's the purified divine eye, the capacity to see things through the mind's eye as well as physical eyes. So
Thank you.
very different to the Thai image. The Thai image of Indra looks quite different. So just not so surprising. You know, different cultures, many centuries. So JC, I believe we have a question. Several questions.
Several questions. May all the statues arrive smoothly.
Thank you. I do appreciate your good wishes for the safe transport of the beautiful.
Yeah, it's quite
Rufus.
far. Yeah. Ajahn, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Question 1. Dear Ajahn, sometimes when I feel I am in a deeper state of meditation, I appear to encounter and embody the lives of many people that I have never met. This only happens when I'm in group practice in my local shrine hall. Could this be experiences from past lives, or could I be daydreaming? Thank you.
Because this person has qualified this question with the fact that it occurs in one place in particular, what I personally suspect is that that particular place may have a kind of a pathway. So parallel realms, there are kind of, they have roads as well, portals, vortexes, whatever you want to call them. There are certain areas where there will be more spirit activity. So if they're looking like human beings, and there are many of them, and I would assume that that shrine hall, that meditation place, may be in the middle of a spirit highway in a parallel realm. As weird as that sounds, that's what I think is probably happening. So.
Thank you, Prajan.
And you spread metta, simply spread metta and dedicate merits. And a lot of consciousness is out there in samsara.
Ajahn, question 2. Hi Ajahn, thank you for sharing with us. Thank you for your sharing with us. I wonder in meditation with mantra, if the mind is peaceful and if there is no thought when one abides in that stillness, should one still continue with the mantra awareness? Thank you.
So usually how it's taught by my teachers is that one uses the mantra until the mind becomes peaceful, and then one can drop it and allow the mind to abide in stillness and peace as the object. But then one has to be determined to notice when the mind comes out of that peacefulness and then pick up the mantra or the meditation object that led to the peacefulness quite quickly, because what can happen is there's a sense of the mind becomes peaceful, it comes out of its peacefulness, and there's that sense that people have of the meditation's over. And actually, that's the most fertile time to actually contemplate, do some investigation. And sometimes when the mind comes out of a peaceful state like that, if we can gently restrain it and incline it So oftentimes through wise thought, because it's more likely to be willing to stay. If we pick up the wise reflection swiftly, it's quite possible that the mind will become more concentrated due to a wise reflective meditation and go back into an even more peaceful state and possibly have some vipassana insight. So yeah, we use the bud-dho or the mantra, bring the mind to a peaceful state if we can. When it moves from the peaceful state, then we pick up our meditation object again and or do some investigation. Quite possible that the mind will go into even deeper state of peacefulness. But if we're not fast with the mindfulness, it will fall into one of the hindrances. It can fall into the hindrances quite quickly, go into restlessness. Oftentimes, a lot of meditators have this reward mentality. I just had a really nice peaceful meditation. I'm going to reward myself now. Go to the fridge, get some ice cream. It's not recommended to reward oneself after a peaceful meditation with sensuality, because it can actually increase the power of sensuality. This is something we have to be careful with. We're charging up the mind's power. What we do after the meditation is we're going to be putting a lot of energy into it, good energy. So that's why I'm saying it's really useful, wise, skillful to do some wise investigation, some skillful meditation, and to actually restrain the impulse to reward yourself with your favorite thing for being good for meditating. Just you can reward yourself, but not straight after the meditation.
Thank you, Rajan. Rajan, question 3. Dear Ajahn, how can one guide one's mother in her 60s to practice Dhamma when her personality is always frustrated and impatient? Knowing that we can never repay our parents' kindness, and sharing Dhamma to them is one of the ways to repay their kindness. I want to repay their kindness by sharing Dhamma with her, especially in these days which death seems so real. I might not be at her bedside if she passes on. How should I guide her? Thank you so much for taking up this question, Ajahn.
The first thing I would say is, it is not true that your mother is always impatient and frustrated. It might be the case that your mother is often impatient and frustrated, but it is not the case that she is always frustrated and impatient. I'm sure she has the occasional benevolent emotion. Well, this is tricky because among monks and nuns, it's basically accepted that we don't try to teach our parents ourselves in the first good number of years, because there's this, I'm your mother, I'm your father, I know best, I raised you. There's not usually much receptivity. And there's this kind of time delay in human minds, isn't there? Like, I'm 49 and a half, and I kind of perceive myself energetically maybe as being 40, 35 sometimes. If I go on a long trip and come back, then I remember I'm 50. But there's this time lag in people's minds. So that goes for your parents as well. To your parents, you're their child, you're their kid. And even if you have gray hairs. So it's not always the case that children can't teach their parents, but it is often the case that it takes longer. So many monks find that after being a monk for 10 years, when other people start to show their respect to you for your practice and your experience and your knowledge, then the parents are more willing to. So if you know someone that you think may impress your mum with their metta or their wisdom, so if you know a teacher who that you can somehow get your mum to have some contact with, and that sometimes can start with arranging flowers, giving food, so whatever it is your mum likes to do. And getting your mum to come to a center where she will meet nice, kind, friendly practitioners and hopefully some teachers. And then hopefully she likes them if they're kind to her, and then become a little bit more receptive. So, and then once those boundaries have softened a bit and mother has become receptive to Dhamma concepts, and then there might be some more opportunities. But it's people's habits can be very deep. And if it's not yet the right time for a person, sometimes despite all of your good efforts and all of the right efforts, it might not come together that a person becomes receptive to Dhamma. Sariputta is a very interesting example. And his mum, I can't remember how many children she had who were arahants, but she had many children and many of them were arahants. And she was a staunch Brahmin. And I think she even had visions of her gods. Sariputta knew that he was close to passing into his final nibbana. And he realized, of all of the thousands of people I've established in stream entry and taught all around India, my mum still hasn't gone for refuge and isn't established in Dhamma. So he decided that he would go home and pass away in his mum's, in the place, in the room where he was born. And so I think he tried to teach her and she wasn't receptive. But then he had diarrhea. So they were taking out buckets of his waste. And then various gods, the gods of the four, the Chatu Maharaja, the four kings, the first heaven realm, came to pay respects, and the mother saw. Indra came to pay respects, and the mother saw. Brahma came to pay respects, and the mother saw. And it was after that that the mother came and said, was that Indra, king of the Devas? Yes, mother. Was that Brahma? Yes, mother. Did they come and pay respects to you? Yes, mother. And then after that, the mother was receptive. And he taught her, and she had the insight into conditions being impermanent and realized the first level of enlightenment. And just like a good mother should, she said, why didn't you teach this to me long ago, son? Why were you so unkind to your mother? Even though he had tried many times. So it's an example we have in the suttas. The foremost bhikkhu disciple in wisdom was not able to teach his mother until she almost passed away. And the thing that impressed her was the fact that gods paid respects to her son. So mothers can be tough. Generally, what happens, what I've observed around the monastics often is, it's through coming in contact with the community, seeing the friendliness, the generosity, the kindness, that they become receptive to the community, the Sangha. And then they may hear wisdom from various different sources, and it seeps in, and then they become receptive to what their monk or nun, son or daughter may have to share. My mother, it's a nice story with my mother. When my mother and father came to visit me after I'd been a monk for 5 years, I did get them to visit Lompo Liam, who is purported to be an Arahant. He's my dear preceptor, the abbot of Wat Nom Papong, Ajahn Chah's monastery. And so I took my mum and dad over. And it's like, you know, they were not particularly spiritual people. So my mum is like, we go into the Dhamma hall, the place of meditation. What I can feel is decades of meditation by thousands of people. My mum walks in and she goes, look at those chandeliers. Wow. And then we go to Ajahn Chah's chedi, and I'm like, look, mum, Ajahn Chah's bones in there, they turn to relics. And my mum's like, wow, look at this gold paint. That must be expensive. Looks just like real gold. So, but when we went to pay respects, well, I went to pay respects to my preceptor, I was slightly frustrated because I'd got my parents to the feet of the Arahant. They had no offerings. They weren't going to bow. It's like, I could just get them in the proximity, but the conditions weren't yet ripe. But what happened, Luang Por Liam being very wise, Luang Por Liam was working with the other monks, moving some pot plants, I think, sweeping some leaves. He was sweaty. He came in, sat down. I paid respects. My parents just kind of sat there staring at him. And he noticed, he realized they didn't have anything. So he gave them some Coca-Cola and a bottle of honey. And when we left that experience, I'm like, oh God, my parents are getting indebted to an Arahant. They're not making any merits with it. It's like, but at least, anyway, so my mum afterwards says, if that's the head of your order, working with the monks, moving around pots and sweeping leaves and giving away, sharing his coke and his honey, she said, that's somebody who I can actually respect. And what was very interesting is 5 years later, thank goodness, Luang Por Liam went to Brisbane. And I was able to say to my mum, Mum, Luang Por Liam's in Brisbane. Would you be willing to go and offer some food and some chocolate? She said, oh, was that monk that gave us the Coke and the... Yes, Mum. Oh, I like him. Yes, we'll go. And she did. She made veggies and she got some chocolate. And I suggested to her, Mum, I'd really like it if you paid respects to this monk, because that would be, I believe that would be very good karma. And she did. She did pay respects and she did make offerings. And so it can take a while, it can take time, and you have to use various skillful means. But obviously, if you can get your parents to meet genuinely inspiring spiritual practitioners, because Luang Por Liam wasn't sitting there thinking, where are my offerings? Or he's not judging them for not offering. He's understanding that they're coming from a different culture, responding appropriately. So yeah.
Thank you for the stories, Ajahn. Ajahn, question 4. Dear Ajahn, in a recent recording, Ajahn spoke of the importance of wise reflection. I believe there is a formal way to practice wise reflection, which I think is also called analytic meditation, but I'm not very familiar with it. I think it is emphasized in Tibetan Buddhism, but I'm curious to learn more about its role in the Thai forest tradition and about when and how a lay practitioner should practice in this way. It is hard to find guided meditations of this sort, so maybe Ajahn would give us a bit of guidance on how to do so. Thank you.
So in the Thai forest tradition, there are, I think it's specifically through chanting. We have a very energetic, powerful chanting tradition, in our lineage. And so typically the monks would come together and chant for half an hour or 45 minutes every morning, every evening. And so the way that in our form, the mind gets familiarized with meditation themes is often through the chanting. So very often we will do 5 reflections. My body is of the nature to age. My body is of the nature to sicken. My body is of the nature to die. Then all that is mine, beloved and pleasing will become separated from me. I am the owner of my karma, heir to my karma, born of my karma, abide supported by my karma. Whatever karma I shall do, of that I shall be the heir. So we chant it again and again and again. So it's like your mind's a little bit peaceful and you're just contemplating these things. It is an analytical meditation or a reflective meditation. In the evening meditations, we'd be more likely to chant. We often chant cardinal suttas. So when you're chanting in the Dhammacakka Sutta, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Paths, and the fact that the various factors which make the contemplation of that lead to liberation, through familiarization, you read it through in English occasionally, then you chant it in Pali, you read through in English. What happens is you end up knowing what you're chanting as you're chanting it. The cause of suffering is craving. There are 3 types of craving. The fact of the liberation from suffering is possible. It's a fact. The Buddha realized it. There is an eightfold path. It said, and then going through what the path factors are. So if you chant the Dhammacakka Sutta often, you are contemplating, supposed to be while you chant it, those 4 noble truths, those 8-fold path factors, and what one has to do in relationship to bring that to fruition. Similarly with the Anattalakkhana Sutta and the Adittaparayaya Sutta. The Anattalakkhana Sutta, going through the 5 khandhas of just with repetition. Is the body permanent? No, Lord. If it's not permanent, is it appropriate to call it a self? No, Lord. It's like, so bhikkhus, whatever form, coarse, refined, past, present, or in myself or outside, all of this should be regarded as not I, not mine, not self. And then we go through the sanya, the sankhara, the vijnana, the vedana. So it's like, if you have a diligent meditation practice, chanting practice, before your meditation practice, you are doing these reflections again and again and again and again. And then something might impress upon your mind. You've done for half an hour, 45 minutes of chanting, and then you can pick up, okay, contemplate the impermanence of rupa. The Buddha asks the bhikkhus, if it was a self, would you be able to stop? You would be able to stop it getting sick. You would be able to stop it aging. You would be able to stop it dying if it was yours. Can you do any of these things? No. Therefore, it is not self. It is not mine. It is not I. It should not be clung to. So it's like contemplating that when you come to do your meditation. It's just kind of it's just accepting it, isn't it? It's like this body is aging. This body is of the nature to sicken. This body has aches and pains. It's not I. It's not mine. It's simply becoming familiar with it, digesting it, accepting it, and the mind's craving and attachment is being kind of peeled off the body through that. Similarly with feelings, but it takes a lot of repetition, a lot of familiarization, a lot of consistency, and the results can be wonderful. So yes, and in the Adittaparayaya Sutta, these cardinal suttas, the first 3 suttas that the Buddha taught, that it's more of a focus on the dukkha characteristic, that the body is burning with aging, sickness, and death, that it is burning with attachment to pleasure and pain. But then we also do a lot of body contemplation. So that starts with the hair of the head, hair of the body's nails, teeth, and skin, and then it moves on to other parts of the body. Starts with the earth element parts, and so there's this 32 parts, and you go through. One's supposed to become familiar with those first 5 parts, and then do the next 5, and then do the next 5. But you just go through them until you develop some skill. I'm a bit lazy. I kind of go hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth. I kind of stick with the teeth for a while, and then I like to go from teeth to bones, because you'll often find that through familiarization, there'll be a part that the mind can settle on more easily, or that it just finds easier. For some people contemplating blood, about 7 liters of blood in a human body, the water element, just considering that blood, the mind can get quite concentrated on the water element in the body and seeing that it's not self. Sense of self falls away when doing that. But one has to put forth quite a bit of effort and becoming familiar. For myself now, because I've done it quite a bit, I can place the perception on the interest on the teeth, and then go from teeth to bone, because they have the same kind of quality and texture. And I know in Burma they do, in the Thai forest tradition, we get a lot of general reminders, and we get these themes that we become familiar with again and again. We have to put forth a lot of our own effort into cultivating our meditation objects and working out what works. And fortunately, we have time to. So various monks, we have time in our kuti, we have time in our walking meditation path, and we have the group practice, and we can keep picking up various things and contemplating, and we find what works for us. And we have teachers who can prompt us if we go off the path. But in Burma, there are retreats where they do go, people might do the body, 32 parts of the body as a retreat, or these kind of things. In Tibetan tradition, yes, there's a lot of analytical meditations, and I wouldn't be there. I do some Tibetan practice, but I'm not a teacher of Tibetan Buddhism, and there are very skilled teachers of Tibetan Buddhism, and so you can it's interesting, kind of the Thai Theravada forest tradition is so simple, but I actually think it's its strength, because personally I believe the best way to become a meditation master is to master a few things. So that comes from repetition and familiarization and consistency. And the Tibetan traditions, like the other extreme, there are so many profound texts and such a vast, sophisticated meditations. And I think it's more of a issue of karmic affinity. So if a person has a karmic affinity with that, then they should wholeheartedly do it. But you have bookcases and bookcases of very incredible texts and sophisticated meditations, and there are good teachers and good teachings around. So, but I'm not the monk to talk about. I do some basic, what we would consider in Thai to be devanusati practices, where you visualize a meditation deity above your head, or you visualize yourself as that deity, as what's called the resultant vehicle, where you visualize the actual result being an enlightened being, as a very wonderful positive affirmation, and also contemplate the empty nature of that as well. And but in terms of the actual analytical meditations, you might want to check out some of the Dalai Lama's books.
Thank you for sharing. I think question number 5. Hi Ajahn, may you be well. I came across a statement, I come from nothingness and return to nothingness. Could Ajahn elaborate more on what it means?
Where did you come across this statement? You didn't come from nothingness, you came from ignorance. So I don't know who made that statement, but it doesn't sound very Buddhist to me. So there are kind of some kind of statements about original mind and kind of rediscovering the original mind. So nature of awareness, mature awareness with wisdom, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom functioning together, is that it will perceive not nothingness, but emptiness. So awareness has an empty nature. And when awareness is fully mature and ripened, it will perceive form as empty as well. And even as it appears, it is of the empty nature. But emptiness is different to nothingness. Emptiness means no abiding permanence, no unchanging solidity. So even as the thing appears, it's in flux, it's in change, it's already changing to something else. So there's no solidity. And so our task is to develop awareness which has an empty nature, that can see things as empty, even as they're arising.
Thank you, Prajan. Prajan, question number 6. Dear Ajahn, Lord Buddha mentions that it is very difficult to take birth from lower realms to human form, the one-eyed turtle simile. However, texts mention that even the Boddhisattva was in the animal form in many lifetimes. And even you mentioned that you were a dragon in some previous life. How come that Bodhisattva and enlightened monks like yourself were in that form at some stage? And how many lifetimes would have taken for Bodhisattva to take rebirth in human form after birth in the lower realm? And what chances we poor mortals have when compared to such great beings? Thank you.
So these kind of speculations can be a little bit, you can't really know the answers in a way. But I think what we can reflect on, which is encouraging, is that even the Buddhas, so we have to have a look at conditionality, right? Dependent co-arising. It's the ignorant being with greed, hatred, and delusion is what becomes, over a long period of time, a generous and virtuous being who becomes receptive to wisdom teachings. It's the generous and virtuous being who becomes receptive to wisdom teachings that becomes the spiritual practitioner. It's a spiritual practitioner who practices for a long time and becomes inspired about the nature, the potential of conscious beings to have less suffering and to be more noble and more gracious and more kind. And that being becomes a dedicated spiritual practitioner. And then after some time, due to those merits, meeting well-practiced practitioners, becoming inspired, at a certain point, that being may enter to become a bodhisattva. And that's obviously taken a long time, but it's important to understand that that was the beginning of the Buddha as well. That was Buddha's start millions of lives ago as ordinary, ignorant, deluded being. There's no creator God that creates bodhisattvas and Buddhas and deluded beings. So it's like we all came from the darkness of greed, hatred, and delusion. The difference between, and we all contain the seed for Buddhahood as well, which is very interesting. So the difference between a bodhisattva being an animal is that if it's a bona fide bodhisattva, then that being has chosen that life in order to cultivate some particular virtue or to support some other beings. So such a being, due to vast merits, is not going to get stuck in lower realms. They will go to the next birth where they can be of benefit and continue their evolution. For ordinary beings, this is why keeping the 5 precepts is incredibly important, because if an ordinary being falls to the lower realms, that's where the turtle simile is relevant. It's like, you just imagine, just thinking about how many excuses you make for yourself not to practice, or how many times you might think you're entitled in holding a grudge, even after 10, 20, 30 years. You know, with your human experience in a kind of a probably middle class kind of a situation, how much you don't practice and how much you indulge and excuse your kilesas. Now imagine you're a ghost and you feel hungry and you feel cold and you have no good friends. How much do you think you're going to practice there? How many more excuses will you not have to feel? Will you have to feel sorry for yourself and not practice? Now, if you fall to a hell realm, how are you going to have a virtuous mind state? So it's not some guardian of hell being mean. Well, look, there are guardians of hell being mean, but it's not some nasty judgmental God that thrusts you to hell and you're going to get out when he forgives you. It's when your mind, if your mind is capable of having a noble, altruistic thought, that's when you're probably likely to get liberated from hell. But if your mind stays stuck in a hellish mind state, that's why it's so hard to get out. So imagine somebody's pulling out your eyeballs and pouring molten metal down your throat and sticking spears and daggers into you and pulling out your toenails. It's going to be difficult to have an altruistic and noble thought. So if you can avoid that, please. And so what the 5 precepts, not only they kind of close the gates to hell, if you keep those precepts, you're not going to be making the heavy karmas that can lead to hell. And obviously you have to watch your mind states as well. And, apparently there's a bodhisattva who lives in hell who helps the virtuous beings. And what's interesting about this is I asked Ajahn if he's real, and he said he is. So he said he went down and had a look. And so, the way this Bodhisattva helps, Siddhigarbha, is that he scans the minds of earth treasure. He's searching for the treasure under the earth, the hell realms being lower. He scans the minds for beings in hell who have merit, keeping in mind that a lot of the hell beings probably have no merit. So it's very difficult to help them. If you just have incredibly negative and heavy mind states and do unskillful things all the time, at a certain point, merit is gone and you just keep compounding on the negative. It's just black, there's no light. The seed potential for arahantship, bodhisattva, Buddhahood is still there, but it's just drowned in blackness. But for beings who did cultivate some virtue and who made a mistake, apparently this bodhisattva will find them and he will spread metta to them. And it's because of the bodhisattva spreading metta to that hell being's mind that the mind is able to cool down a bit. And then he will ask them, can you see the error of your ways? Do you see your mistake? And when they say, yeah, I can, it's like, that's the arising of hiriyottapa, conscience and shame, wholesome shame. And then he says, but do you also remember this skillful thing you did? And he uses his mind to help them remember something. And it's when they remember something skillful that they did with gladness, their mind becomes a glad and happy mind, and they're able to leave the hell realm. But they need the help. So we have a beautiful statue of Siddhigarbha in our monastery, and I have paid respects to him, and I have told him, if I fall to hell, Venerable Bodhisattva, hope you've got my number. Come and find me. I'd be very happy to pay respects to you. Got to use whatever opportunities present themselves. Hopefully I'm not going to hell.
Yeah, we can. It's a very nice statue. Is it Ajahn, is that a statue at your cherry?
That's right. The one that Chayek helped me to finish by traveling to Fujian to supervise the finishing of. Yes. Very, very lovely image. There was another question about that, JC. Well, somebody believes in heaven, ghosts and animal realms, but doesn't believe in hell realms. And they asked, will this be an obstruction to their practice? So anyway, I remember reading the question. When I was 15, I did not believe in a creator God intuitively, because I had the thought, if there was an all-powerful, almighty creator God, and if he was kind, the world would not be like this. So it's not possible that there is a kind, almighty creator God. But I did believe in angels, and I did believe in ghosts. And I didn't believe in hell. I thought that was some kind of a guilt trip made up by theistic religions. But I did believe in karma. But since I grew up in a fairly comfortable, in my childhood situation, I didn't meet any really evil people. Sometimes when my mum got angry, her eyes turned green and she did look a bit like a witch, but that was just moments. But I didn't meet any, I love you, Mum. I didn't meet any genuinely evil people. But since becoming a monk, and since learning a bit more about history, I no longer have any doubt about the existence of hell. So, and if you believe in rebirth and you believe in karma, and if you understand that if you cause beings to suffer and feel harm, that somehow or other you are going to experience something similar, that is already a very skillful view, which is going to ameliorate your unskillful behavior significantly. Just so, I don't know if you have to believe in hells, but we do have to understand that the karmas that we create, until we've liberated ourselves from cyclic existence, we will experience similar things that we cause others to experience. So there's no escaping it. But what you have to understand is that it's not a creator God that creates the hells. It's the power of greed, hatred, and delusion that creates the hells. And if people do really, really bad things, then the hell manifests, because people have to receive the fruit of their actions. So somebody like Mao Zedong, Stalin, Pol Pot, people who studied divide and conquer strategies, pitted human beings against each other, set minions in motion to kill, to torture, to terrorize thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of beings, then how could that being in producing so much negative karma, how could that being not end up in a situation where the negative vipaka karma was incredibly intense? So yes, I believe, unfortunately, I believe hells exist. But you don't have to believe it. But I do hope you just believe in karma and be careful.
Hi Ajahn, why do we mentally recite bud-dho instead of Buddha? Thank you.
I don't know for sure, but I think it's like the Buddha was the one who knew liberation, enlightenment. And I think Buddha is more like the act of knowing. It's the positive affirmation of mindfully knowing, mindfully knowing. But the Buddha means the one who knew ultimate truth, liberated through knowing ultimate truth. So it's a positive affirmation. Now I'm the one cultivating mindfulness, knowing of forms as forms, feelings as feelings, mind objects as mind objects, arising, ceasing.
Rajan,
Yes.
we probably won't be seeing you until after the Kathina. Would you like to say a few things about the Kathina in Anandagiri before we?
Yeah, so we did have 5 bhikkhus spend the rainy season retreat, and that means we can have a Kathina ceremony. And we did have some kind people want to sponsor a Kathina. So we will be having our Kathina. And our Kathina here, we usually are going to try to do it at the Chedi area. So it works better for us to do it before the meal. So probably proceedings would start, meditation, etc. But actual talks, offering probably start at 8 in the morning. Hopefully it's not raining. And I spoke with a student who's going to try to get we're not promising you an Ajahn Anand style media production. We're just going to place a laptop facing Ajahn Anand. You'll be able to see and hear the Ajahn Anand, myself, and the Kathina donors. And for those of you who want to be there, send out your mind to be there in spirit. Thank you to Anumodana, to the people in the group who have contributed to our Kathina. Very touched. Of course, before the Kathina, I have my presentation of the ceremonial fan on behalf of the king. That's happening on the 5th. And then the Kathina is happening on the 7th. we may be chanting 180 to be so's at the Buddha Chinarad on the 4th. So that means I won't be in my own monastery trying to prepare for the most important ceremony. I'll be somewhere else the day before. But I'll just try to trust the guru and go with the flow and hope it all turns out okay. So.
Looks like it's going to be a very busy
nice.
week for you, Prajan, the next 2 weeks.
Well, the thing is, the COVID phenomenon adds other complications. Like, it would be my preference to just welcome everybody, but because there's still a good number of infections in the area, everybody who attends has to have, go through the torture of having their nose swabbed and have to not allow too many people to come. So and because police and soldiers and the governor is coming, you can't not keep the rules, if you know what I mean. So middle way.
Enjoy.
Prajan, we wish you well.
Thank you. And I'll try to get, I'll speak to my helper and I'll try to get an ID and a password to you for those who want to join in the Kathina ceremony.
Sadhu, 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 Prajan.
Sadhu, sadhu.
Where's the cat?
Thank you.
Oh, you want to see the
Where's
cat
the
of
Dhamma?
course.
Yes.
Hi, look
So
here.
here's the Boddhisattva that came to be my friend. He's been doing lying down meditation.
Okay.
Look
Hi to
at
the people. Sawadee-kap, sawadee-kap.
That's a lot. The cat. Huh? That's a lot. The cat.
We have to tell him not to eat the internet cord, please.
Okay. Good night.